everyone. I'm here with Seeley. Hello, Seeley. It's lovely
Hi.
to be with you.
It's wonderful to get to be here with you. Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
Yeah, and we're meeting in December, right kind of in the last days before the winter solstice. And it's just feels like such a rich and beautiful time to be together. And I want to jump right in and waste no time. So please tell us a little bit about you. Who are you in the world? Where are you in the world? And maybe a little bit about how our work together began.
Yeah. Seeley Roebuck. I live in San Francisco Bay Area, a little town called Orinda. I've been studying to become a somatic experiencing practitioner for the last 2 years. Your name, I've been trying to figure out how I found you. I think it was like in a moment of desperation a couple of years ago. Like, yeah, I know I was in kind of down and out place in my relationship to food. So I definitely learned of you in my attempt to seek healing of like just being done with this messed up, painful relationship that I've had with food in my body for so long in my life, since I was 10 years old, that I can remember. And so I don't think it was a person. I think I just Googled and found you online, and I got your book and I loved it. And it's amazing. And it's on my altar over here. And then we did a call, and then I waited like I think a year or so. And I always had it in the back of my mind, like, am I going to do it? Am I going to do it? And then I entered the SE world around that time, and then I ended up deciding, and I started work. I did your somatic boundaries class first, which was amazing, unbelievable, and every human should consider taking that class. And then after that, I was like 6 months peace with food. Like it was a no-brainer for me to do that.
It was wonderful. I think your group graduated. Maybe it's been 3 or 4 months now since your group completed. And I miss you guys. You're an incredible group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
No,
really
you,
miss it too. I think about everyone and just wonder like what's everything like for everybody right now, especially as we navigate the holidays. Like this is real life application of all the tools. And so, I mean, I know every day is, but the holidays seem to be like the crack version of navigating a
yes,
relationship with food.
absolutely. The holidays are a unique time because the day is getting shorter.
Mhm.
Our body budget is lower.
Uh-huh.
And naturally, the nervous system is oriented towards kind of an inward movement and more towards conservation and withdrawal.
Yeah.
And so, probably if we were in tune with nature, would be spending more time in bed and less time outside and less time with other people.
Yeah.
And our social habits and our calendars are completely the opposite of what the
Right.
body needs. So by the time we come to December, we're actually quite depleted and being asked to enter relationships with multiple nervous systems and travel and taking stock of the financial results of the year and all the things that your kids have to do in school and all the navigation of whose house are we going for what, it can just be so overwhelming. And so I'm not surprised that people really struggle with food. And I used to really struggle around the holidays.
Yeah.
And I remember when holidays got easier, I was like, oh, okay, there's hope.
Yeah.
There is hope. I don't have to hit a reset button in January.
Yeah.
I can just live my life.
Yeah. I that's different for me, since being with your class with Peace with Food is I don't feel this like, the whole script around January is a restart, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But one thing I do notice is that I want to commit to more intentionally or be more intentional about is rest, and just being with those practices of being activating my parasympathetic system and just creating more space for that. which is such a different mentality of how I was thinking and kind of programmed to think when I came into this work, specifically this food journey with you. I remember when we started Peace with Food and you said, don't do any intermittent fasting, like don't change your, don't start some new protocol, like just give yourself a break during this period. And I remember thinking like, I didn't even really want, well, I kind of do intermittent fasting here and there, but not really intentional. It's just because I'm so busy, like until 1, and then I'm like, oh, I guess that's an intermittent fasting day. Um, but but I remember when you said that, I thought, oh my God, like to not do that, I wanted to do it so much more. I mean, because I realized I rely on that kind of loop, like that settles me. There's a relaxation into knowing, oh, I'm just going to control everything. It never works. I always sabotage myself historically, and then I just kind of relax into, there's a cycle. That's a cycle. So I consider it a win that I'm not engaging in that whole cycle of like, well, I'm going to start this protocol on Monday,
Yeah, that's a
Mm.
very, very impressive awareness because you're actually describing like what's known as the diet cycle,
Mhm.
which is, we have some internal unpleasant experience, unpleasant activation. We come up with a plan to do something, intermittent fasting or whatever it is. And then in the doing of it, we temporarily get some relief from feeling bad.
Right.
And if we restrict enough, restriction was my superpower when I was in my disordered eating time. If we
Yeah.
restrict enough, the chemistry of that restriction is a temporary bolster. It's
Uh-huh.
a temporary high. And
Right.
so then we kind of ride on that until it's no longer possible because the system cannot starve itself without limits.
Yeah.
And some self-protective behaviors come in. And then we don't understand those self-protective behaviors. We think that there's sabotage or that we're doing something that's wrong.
Right.
Then we feel shame about it. And then to fix the shame, we hit the reset button again. But the whole diet cycle is actually a strategy to not feel what we feel.
Yeah.
And if we can start to loosen that up, and it sounds like you've really done that in our work, if you loosen up from the grip of the strategy, like any strategy, it never fully disappears. It just goes in the background.
Yeah.
It's something that Brad Kemmer, who is my teacher in NARM, says, our strategies, we just kind of like put them in our back pocket.
Yeah.
We don't destroy them. We might need them at some point, but they're not ruling our lives. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you've gotten some of that space.
Yeah. There's definitely, there is, yeah, I can feel the strategy, like it's there, but it's not driving me. It's not hijacking me, especially the relationship, the experience of shame and self-loathing. Like that was so tightly wound into my story. And to be free of that, and even to see myself in the mirror and see it's not perfect in the way I want to see it, is like, who cares? It's fine. I'm okay with it. Like, I love myself. I love my body. I'm so grateful that I could drive my kids to school today and I could wrap all the presents and I could, you know, make lamb stew last night. Like, that is where my attention is going instead of feeling shame because I can see bumps on the outside of my thigh. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Sounds
That is
like
a huge win to me.
massive win.
Yeah.
So we kind of jumped into some of your new awarenesses and some of your wins. Would you be willing to give potential, students or current students, people who are listening, a little bit of a before and after sense of, pre last February, pre when we started our work together? How did you relate to food? What did you experience in your day-to-day life that perhaps was causing some suffering? And how are things different now?
Yeah. So before I started working with you, it was super normal for me to like constantly want to outsource an answer. Like one example is I did a program called Bright Line Eating in 2017. It's very restrictive, sort of based originally on like 12 steps, OA, Overeaters Anonymous kind of stuff, but very, very, very restrictive. And I was a rock star. I lost 40 pounds. It was amazing. I looked great, but I was filled with, I was thinking about this yesterday. It was in December of 2017, and I looked amazing, which was weird too, because everyone like treats you differently when you look amazing. Like, wait a minute, anyway, that was weird. Um, I didn't have a therapist then. I probably could have done a lot of good work with that at the time. But anyway, I remember I like slipped and I had, I think, a kombucha with alcohol in it, and I hadn't done that. And so that's the first break, the first like minor. And from then on, it was right around Christmas. I was obsessed, like activated the obsession. And then it was just a slippery slope. And in the next year, I gained everything back. But my point is the irony is like I looked great. I did all the things, but I had no peace with food. None. I was loathing. I mean, I was judging every little thing. When I looked in the mirror, I was like, it wasn't ever good enough. I was hiding parts of my body, all that. And it was just so toxic. And that's probably the worst I was in my adult years. And then, things pretty quickly turned around in 2019 when I started doing therapy with a somatic experiencing practitioner. And then I started on my own health coaching, which turned into somatic experiencing for me. But aside that, when it wasn't that bad, it was pretty bad. Like just always wanting to sign up for the next thing. Like, is this program going to heal me? Is this one? Is that one? I mean, I've probably spent so much money on courses that I would feel would tell myself are going to give me that container that I can be accountable to, or that I can, you know what I mean? All this shit. Like I have spent so much money on that and bought into it. It's just the cycle you just described, where you get that sense of relief after you make the commitment. And then 2 days in, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But I knew it was a cycle. And I remember being in your group, like maybe a month in or 2 months in, just having like a real emotional session one day with the group and just saying like, I just surrendered. Like, I can't do this anymore. I don't, I just can't. Like my poor little body, the narrative couldn't sustain with my physiology,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
wasn't true. And a part of my process with you had to be me realizing, who am I without that narrative? Like who is Seeley? Like, because so much of my personality had evolved around this story that you will never be free in your body. You will never find peace in your body. You will always, yeah, I might have some good weeks or months, but it will always come back and it will always be bigger than me.
Yeah.
And that has definitely uncoupled and untangled a good amount. So that's nice.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. The words that come to me as I receive your share is conditional.
Mm-hmm.
It's like peace is conditional
Yes.
and it's based on, some external parameter, whatever the parameter du jour is. Sometimes people are obsessed about their hair and sometimes they're obsessed about the mole or whatever it is, or the dimples on their thighs. And trying to manage that, which takes a ton of sympathetic energy, by the way, trying to manage that. And when we run out of our own sympathetic energy, we're like, oh, I'm happy to pay you to whip me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll borrow some of yours.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want somebody to just like really tell me what to do and really to like whip me into shape. We even have that in the language. It's like, oh, let me borrow your insanity of arousal with which you're going to suppress the physiology, it's a violent cycle,
Yeah.
that, oh, that will win me the thing that I want. And at the end of the day, most people just want to belong.
Yeah.
And at best, we feel temporarily, conditionally included. And the difference between inclusion and belonging is massive.
Yeah.
And so I feel like what you're describing and what I suffered with, and so many of the students that come through the Peace with Food School struggle with, is really this. It's like, oh my God, I am actually starving for something that my attachment system really needs. And here's the way that I've put conditions on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was conditioned with those conditions in my family of origin and society, in those small groups in which I developed. And so to start to be free from that is really like kind of like an episode of The Matrix.
Yeah.
It's like The Matrix 1. It's like, oh, the world is not what I thought it was. And I've been looking at myself from the outside.
Yeah.
To come inside is going to require some embodiment, and the embodiment practice that you began with somatic experiencing training with your therapist, that you continued in our somatic boundaries masterclass, and then in your Peace with Food 6-month group, that's the way in.
Yeah.
That I have somewhere else to go when I'm not outside myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, as somebody who's spent a lot of my life in a sympathetic, various versions and colors of sympathetic state, it's been a challenge. Like to, I mean, I remember sitting in the groups, and sometimes, as I reflect back, like sometimes it was a little bit excruciating, a little bit hard. Like, and I love, I'm so grateful that I completed it, because it was so useful. Like the content that you give us is mind blowing. Like I use it even in my own work with clients. But it was hard, coming in. I remember so many times you'd like have us address the transition from where we were to now. And that in my system is not, that is like, I have to learn that, remember that my body somewhere in some other time and dimension knows how to do that intrinsically, but it's not something I was ever supported in doing. I'm used to doing the rev and the rev and the rev to collapse. I'm super good at that. So that was interesting. And just to show up weekly. But I think while that was hard, and I can reflect on resistance, that it was resistance from my body, because I was learning you were always holding space for us to go slow, to get the information beautifully, articulately clear, but experientially, it was slower than my pace of like, go, 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 go. And so that was hard, but that is kind of the magic sauce that has created a foundation to where I think the things I want to focus on are rest and slowing down. Like I never imagined I would ever think like that before.
Yeah. It's kind of, it makes me laugh, because we began the year with the Somatic Boundaries Masterclass, which is very much a sympathetic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then we finished the year with the Sacred Rest Masterclass, which is very much about the parasympathetic, and really how do we discharge and deactivate and go into transitions and go into middle ground? How do we teach our form, or help the form remember, if that has been an experience at some point, to not be on? Because like you said, just like going from one activation cycle to the next, it's like most people have two settings, on and then on more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's and this is not a state that supports nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
Neither is collapse.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to be constantly revved up, and then my eating behaviors are an expression of the rev, or if I'm going to be then collapsing in order to take a break from the violence that this exerts on my tissues, that I'm going to go into collapse, which is also not a nourishment supportive state, then I really don't have a place in my physiology that supports me to eat.
Yeah.
And that's really tricky. It's really tricky to go, oh, I just don't know how to eat.
Yeah.
Because becoming a competent eater happens in relationship. And so many of us didn't have the relational holding to allow us to yield so that we can nourish ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And the concept of yielding, I remember talking with you about that just one-on-one of like, oh my gosh, I didn't really have a felt sense. Well, I didn't have a practice around it, but I definitely was not as familiar. I wasn't familiar with yielding to anything, to just even every night when I go to bed and I I try to really allow my body to feel the sensation of surrendering into the bed. And I'm also very aware when I'm not, like if my neck is holding me and all that. But just to be able to make that connection and notice yielding, not yielding, like that's so important. That is such a game changer for me to be able to recognize that.
Yeah.
And one other thing that you just said is like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get it all back. Whatever you just said a minute ago about like the nourishing environment.
Mm-hmm.
When we are in a constant state of sympathetic or in freeze, it's from that place for me personally that I would seek somebody else to tell me how it's done. Well, that makes perfect sense because I'm not in a balanced place where I feel it all connected to me. And so as a result, I truly felt like I didn't know my own body. I don't know how to eat. I don't know how to do that whole cycle. And one of the things that you taught us, I remember so much, I kind of had this aha. What are I was looking through my notes today about clarity, action, satisfaction, and relaxation. And that parallel to the push and the pull and surrender. And, that whole thing kind of just made me see, oh, it's all a cycle. Everything is a cycle. And by the time I've sat myself down and I've made my beautiful salad, I'm in that cycle. And if I have a tendency to like want to have something sugary that like feels not right after it's because something in that cycle
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit off.
Right.
And I can see it now. And that is so much more empowering than to just feel like I'm just in this unstoppable loop and then I need to outsource something to somebody else and then I feel shame because I'm like, I can't do it and I don't know myself. This is so much more empowering. It's my body. I get to decide. I get to choose. And that is where I want to feed my attention and my relationship to, because it's a whole new relationship. It's a whole new way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And I'm just going to kind of take it from where you just finished. It's like it's a whole new way of thinking about it, but it's also the way that the biology is set up to function.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get to kind of rejoin the river of life. You get to rejoin the river of how it's done, as opposed to, and I write about this a lot. I think a lot of people who are regular readers of my newsletter know I looked for help here and here and here and here and here. And there's this reaching
Mm-hmm.
for help me.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like grasping at straws. But we get a little like flailing in our attempts to grasp onto this and onto that to help us.
Yeah.
But when we're doing it from a state of not a ground of health, but a ground of dysregulation, that in that hyper aroused or shut down state, we actually don't have good discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And so all we're trying to do is alleviate the pressure and get some release and some relief from what is painful,
Yeah.
as opposed to actually trying to solve something that has steps and has phases.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you as a somatic experiencing practitioner and a person in the coaching world, you know how change works.
Yeah.
But if we don't know what the problem is, we can't even offer the right steps
Yeah.
to the solution. And it sounds like the way we laid it out in our curriculum, and you've been able to take it in, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about is it in the curriculum. And the curriculum's like a buffet. It's like,
Yeah.
can you put on your plate and chew and swallow and digest what is in the buffet? The way you've digested it has really been impactful and made a huge difference. And you're now seeing, oh, there's even more to resting. There's even more to the yield
Yeah.
that I can continue to embody.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about is I notice, um, I wonder if my capacity for rest and relaxation is just a little bit so low, and that's partly why even after I've taken the time to make a beautiful meal for myself and I sit down and I enjoy the beautiful meal. And I notice though, if I reach for something that is, I really don't want, only a part of me wants it, it's like, it's the habitual part of me. It's, I can watch it happen. I'm like, oh, this is interesting, but I watch it and it's as if I don't have that much capacity for the relaxation process.
Yeah.
Like I notice when I do reach for that, I don't allow very much time for the digestion to happen. And if I just practiced maybe allowing a little bit more space, like maybe 1 or 2 minutes or whatever, and a bunch of other practices that you have too, like the parietal hold, like so many fun things that you offer in teaching us. Um, I think that that's partly where my personal work I
Yeah.
need to look at is allowing to have more capacity in that relaxation place. And I see it show up in other areas. So I'm starting to kind of connect the dots
Yeah.
that it's that space that's like, that's where my attention might be best served.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the next frontier, the
Yeah.
next threshold. And
Yeah.
also one thing to consider is how much of meeting our needs is actually sympathetic. It's about action,
Hmm.
but relaxation is about connection, and relaxation is about landing with something or someone in relationship. So I
Hmm.
can relax when my chair is comfortable. I can relax because I know this hammock is going to hold me.
Hmm.
I can relax on the shoulder of somebody who really understands me. There is no relaxation outside of relationship. And I think for so many of us, we didn't get that ground, that foundational ground of yielding in relationship with caregivers who did have the parasympathetic tone that allowed us to rest. And
Yeah.
so then we have to relearn it as adults, but also on the way to learning it is meeting the unmet needs of the little ones. And I
Hmm.
think that's why so often we keep our transitions very short. We
Hmm.
we go from hyperarousal to more arousal to collapse,
Hmm.
because in the transition and the deactivation is when we become porous and we become more vulnerable and we become softer and we become more yin. And in that softness, we become more permeable to ourselves too, not just to the outside world. And do I have the support to meet all that is tender inside of me? Do I have the ego strength to meet all that is tender inside of me? And we don't get capacity and ego strength in 2 months or in 3 months or even in 6 months. It's a process of meeting ourselves over and over and over again with care,
Yeah.
um, and accepting some of the unacceptable things.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that is such an important piece for anyone who's considering this too, because, part of me naturally was like, well, am I going to be like 20 pounds lighter when I'm done with this class?
Boy,
It doesn't
yes.
work that way. And how beautiful that it doesn't, because it has nothing to do with food or weight, anything to do with it. It has to do with attending to my system, to the way
Right.
my system has been kind of programmed
Yeah.
and what I was born into and what I'm surrounded by and reinforced in our culture and intergenerational and all that. And it's like that is just such a different lens to come out, is so much more empowering. So yeah, I find that the way I talk about it is just so different than like the old way was there was like no way out. It's like a box and
Mm,
a cage and you're trapped in. There's no way out. And this is just empowering for each individual human. I
yeah,
mean, access to choice in a way that you don't in the other paradigm.
yeah. There's a lot of agency in inhabiting yourself fully
Hmm.
and being able to hear from yourself in a way that makes sense.
Hmm.
You spoke earlier about how you had this experience, and those were not your exact words, but something to the effect of not really trusting what the body is giving you.
Hmm.
And the reality is when we are living in chronic hyperarousal or shutdown or swinging between the two, we don't have access to the healing impulse. We don't have access to what is wise inside.
Hmm.
And so a sufficient slowing down, which feels like you mentioned uncomfortable to some people in the beginning, a sufficient slowing down is needed, but slowing down with support. And I'm
Hmm.
not going to slow down in a vacuum and in a free fall. I'm actually slowing down, but there's substance here in the field, and there's somebody holding the space in which I can slow down.
Yeah.
And that can rewrite a new possibility for the biology.
Yeah.
Whereas before, like you said, it's like the biology is limited because that's all it knows. And that's the wise way in which it survived.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And it's like how we don't just go and get to dismantle the very thing that saved our lives.
Yeah.
That's actually not respectful to ourselves or to the situations and the circumstances that we overcame.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so it's really like sometimes I'll talk to new students about this metaphor of imagine that you are in a vast ocean with no land in sight and you have a lifesaver. And here you are floating in your lifesaver, and here comes a guy on a raft. I don't know why it's a guy in my imagination, but it's like a guy on a raft, and he looks like Tom Hanks in Shipwrecked.
Hmm.
You know, like he's emaciated and he's got like underwear made of a bandana and he's missing half his teeth and and he says, "Come with me," and you'll be like, "I'm good."
Yeah.
I'm good, thank you, dude. Oh, but there's land. I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
good. No, just thank you. Okay, you're gonna regret it. That's okay. Just keep rafting along. But if the Coast Guard comes in the official freaking Coast Guard red boat,
Yeah.
and there's like 10 uniform, men and women who are working on board and who are like, hey, we got a distress signal. One of our helicopters saw you, and we know you've been out here for, 12 hours and you're probably dehydrated. We have an ambulance waiting for you. Your family has been contacted. We have a
Yeah.
warm blanket on board. Would you be willing to come with us? You're, 8 miles from the Bahamas. We're going to take you.
Yeah.
You'll be like, okay, I'm willing to let go of the lifesaver, but can I take my lifesaver with me?
Yeah.
And then you get to go home and put that lifesaver on your wall in your meditation room and never forget. But you're not just gonna let go of what saved your life when you're just barely learning how to cope with
Yeah.
living in a nervous system that is hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years old, like the 2 million-year-old man, as Carl Jung used to say. It's like, how do you how do you begin to trust what's new?
Hmm.
Is by over and over and over again becoming really competent and developing the capacity so that when that competent crew comes to pick you up, you're like, sure, I will jump on
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
And it's really tricky because you have these like parallel tracks. You have the old way and the new way. But the beginning, the new way is like, a little wacky. It's
Yeah.
not trustworthy yet. And so it takes time to earn the trust that the biology is going to catch you.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's not, it's the opposite of a quick fix and all the things. It is none of those things. So it doesn't, it's, it's, it's not sexy too. It's not before
No,
and after pictures.
no, no.
It's like, it's, it's so, it's scrappy, you
Yep,
know, and gritty, and
yep.
it's not linear. And,
Nope.
and that's okay. And that, ironically, like it feels more aligned than ever. I'm so grateful, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of messy deal being a human being,
mhm.
living in a body that's hundreds of thousands and millions of years old. Like, oh, I collapse. Well, that's a 500 million year old structure.
Yeah,
Oh, I crave. Well, that goes back to tiny little lamprey fish that,
yeah,
stick on your aquarium and, suck on the glass. It's like those guys are stuck on there 24/7.
yeah,
And we share that part of the brain with them, the craving part. Um, and then there is no magic pill.
hmm,
Even, we've done interviews before speaking about complex medical decisions and, even some of the new medicines that will support what the gut cannot produce, but that in no way takes care of the relationship with your in-law.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And so this biopsychosocial model is a real thing. And like you said, it's gritty, it's not sexy. There's no flashy before and after photos where you're like all tan and oiled up.
yeah,
Um, but what is really lovely is you become, I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't sound this almost like overly romantic, but it's like you become best friends with your biology.
yeah. I think for me, what I would say is I've become more aligned. I'm more in right alignment with me, with who I am. Because it's not just, I don't do this dance just with food. I do it with everything, you know. So to be able to start to make those connections and see where those patterns are, like I like to look at it like maybe food is the superpower and it's just the gift that we are given to see our dance, how I do this dance, how I was programmed. It's the gift because I like to think of it in a positive way as opposed to it being this anchor that, sometimes it can be that, but really it's the gift. It's the doorway through.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so to be able to, if I took a medicine that was cutting off that connection for me and of the craving, it's the craving will show up in my relationships, in my all these other, in my work or whatever, in some other way. And you can't just, a pill doesn't fix that or a shot doesn't and that's the root. And if we don't look at the root, we're not, it's like a band-aid and it will come back. It will always hunt us. I don't mean to be so like aggressive in my words, but I know in my body, I have to go to the root. I have to go to the core of my physiology. And from there, I can tell how it's like there's a ripple effect, a positive of me being in my own alignment in other areas. It's not just food. It's called Peace with Food, the group I'm referring to with you, but it's really like peace with yourself, peace with what is in alignment in your world. That's what it is. It's remembering who you are.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. And there's something about that cycle you spoke about earlier, the action cycle, the sensitivity cycle, which we look at as the eating cycle, that when we go through it well, we feel satisfied, nourished, and at peace.
Hmm.
When we go through it compulsively and we get stuck on one end of it, it doesn't feel good. It
Hmm.
doesn't feel good to solve 99% of your problems with eating or not eating.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel good. When you can apply the right kind of action to the
Hmm.
right kind of need, there's a good feeling inside.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, having the capacity to rest, having the capacity to feel good, having the capacity to be settled. This is something that we might need to relearn if it wasn't given to us after birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. I have a question for you that I like to ask all the students and graduates that I have the honor of interviewing. If somebody was wondering, is this for me? Is it right for me to move in the direction of nervous system healing to support a more organic and aligned relationship with food? Um, what would you say to them?
I would say, hell yeah. I mean, I'm, I'm, I love this work. I've been dealing with this in some way since I was a little girl. At age 16, I went into a hospital, an adult hospital for eating disorders. So like I've been steeped in this. And when I say that, what I mean is I've been exposed to so many different healing modalities and treatment stuff, all the things, and I just have been in this line of work ish throughout my life in various ways. And I love the way you lay out and how you have created this program because there's such a perfect combination of the way you hold space is so brilliantly thought out. The education and what people walk away with, like it is a buffet of tools. Like I often go back because I have 3 classes with you on that I can reflect on my portal of yours online. Like I can click on anything and I will get exactly what I need. There's such a beautiful amount of tools that are applicable. And it's it just like what we've been talking about, it just opens up the awareness of this is another way of doing the work.
Mm.
Another thing I'll say, and this is probably not great that I'm going to say this, but I'm trained as a somatic experiencing practitioner. But when I started working with you, it kind of like blew the lid off of like it kind of rattled me a bit because you taught me somatic stuff on a whole new level. Like when I work with clients, now it makes me like, I want to go to the level of where you are. Like I want them to know these things. That's also why I like to refer people to you because I'm like, have this as your foundation because this goes to the roots, the reflexes, the perinatal, the in the earliest days. Like that's how it all formed. So I feel like this is an essential when you look at somatics, this is the foundation. And so I feel a little bit like it's out of integrity to work without having this as a foundation with people. What I'm trying to say is if anyone's thinking about it, this is a must. Everybody needs to have this information. I mean,
I
that's a
love
little bit of
that.
a blast, but if you're not in the SE world, 100%, there's such an opportunity for healing. And if you are actually someone who's a practitioner, because there was a lot of practitioners that I've sat with in these sessions, not only is this a healing journey, was it for me, but I seriously use so much of your material and your tools that you've given us, the experiential tools, and my clients love them. And it's so useful. And so it's so much more than just my SEP, route. It's like you've given me such a huge landscape to choose
Mm.
from to share. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really good to reiterate that to each other as somatic practitioners that it takes time to go from somatically informed to somatically oriented to somatically competent.
mhm,
And somatic experiencing is a legacy, it's a lineage, it's a massively helpful modality what Peter and the faculty after Peter have created. And it's a shock trauma modality.
mhm,
And when you look at why somebody develops an eating disorder, my teacher, Rachel Lewis from the Embodied Recovery Institute, who I adore, Rachel says nobody has an eating disorder because of shock trauma. And I believe her
Yeah.
when she says that. I mean, there might be some case where, you had an airbag smush your cranial nerves and you're dealing with it, but that'll be something that has a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
Eating disorders feel endless.
Yeah.
They feel like they are up etched into your bones.
Yes.
And, even those of us who have been through recovery and consider ourselves recovered, the echo that's in your bones is always there.
Yeah.
Because it's something that, we develop preconception, at conception, in utero. Eating disorders don't start when you're 11. And so I think it's so important to name, if you look at it as a Venn diagram, that you have, the defense system, which somatic experiencing is just spectacular at addressing. And you have the attachment system, right? Where you need something like NARM or DARE or, some object relations work, like Masterson's work. And then you have the sensory system and the primitive reflexes and all of that is actually kind of in the realm of occupational therapy, myofunctional therapy, that you actually need it all.
Yeah.
And as somebody who came to somatic experiencing as a body worker, I was already very aware of like, oh my God, that person is mouth breathing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do right now to shift their regulation until I figure out a way to get their mouth to close.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's that, what are the biological bases of regulation that are essential so that the defense system, the attachment system, and the sensory processing system can work together?
Yeah.
And I think you're speaking to that. It's like the buffet is really big.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know anybody in this field who has all of these. I mean, you bring a huge team of lineages in your work and you embody it. And so that is so clearly evident in how you teach us and how you hold space for us. And that is like, that's so much. I'm so grateful for that. I completely benefit from that.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that you can take it in. I love that you experience it as nourishing. It just lights me up to think about you. So
But can I just say for a second, like you've done a lot of education, like you know
yes,
a lot of this stuff. Like
I
most
do.
people don't. I mean, you're a Jedi in this space. Just so we're clear, in
Oh
case
my God.
anyone like, doesn't know you or only knows a little bit about you, to have gone down and become an expert in each one of these fields is a really big deal. And that I think, next to your own personal experience, and I'm sure a million other things, but like that gives you that I can see when you teach that it's because of that huge well of information that you can pull from that allows you to channel and create this program, this thing that is so needed for our bodies.
Hmm.
To me, it's like you're doing magic. I mean, and you have all these lineages supporting you. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful, and it's not out there. Like you're it.
Yeah, thank you. That's very, very kind. I'm very aware of other people who are doing amazing work, and I don't feel alone in what I'm doing, including having students like you who are taking their own somatic competence into their businesses and into their practices. But the reality is, this is a very new field.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all kind of like describing the elephant, a little bit like, oh, like that story of people being blindfolded and everybody touching a part of an elephant and trying to describe what they're touching. And I think for now, at least I know that it has a trunk and I know that it has ears and I know that it has feet.
Yeah.
I don't know that I know what the whole thing is, but I know that the thing is bigger than what I see. And as I'm developing my work, especially in the postgraduate programs and, collaborating with people who do family systems, family constellations work, or people who are doing more of the OT work around sensory processing, I'm seeing, oh, wow, each of you, each of the students that I get to meet,
Yeah.
and myself as, you know, a unit of biology, we are so unique. And to find a way into each person's organization is such a beautiful challenge.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you know, I look at your whole group, the group you're in, and it was just incredible. My last question for you
Yes. Okay.
is, you've done a ton of work and you're very similar to me in this, just like you're like a dog with a bone. It's like,
Yeah.
this is important to me and I'm doing it and I'm not letting go of my bone. And I love that about you. I think that there's a unique way in which those of us who experience education as a high, I
Mm.
think it's a superpower and it's really cool. But I'm wondering, you've done a ton of one-on-one work and you've also experienced individual work within the somatic experiencing training and other trainings that you've done. Where was the group learning a unique value to you? Because you've done a lot of one-on-one too. And of course, within our program, we have one-on-one as well.
Yeah. Where, like, how was that group? Do you mean specific
How
to,
was the group? How is the group different from one-on-one? Yeah.
oh, it was, and do you mean specifically the piece with food or, okay. That, that, well, for me, because I've been in this stuff for a while, that was really interesting for me because I had to practice a little bit of patience, and in my system. And I also got, like, I softened a little bit because I do have this, like, I'm hungry, I want to learn, like, I could easily, if you just drilled me with 90 minutes of content, I'd be like, yes, like, this is what I love. You know what I mean? I could do
Yeah.
that all day long in my sleep. Um, but it softened me. And it was that parasympathetic support, and that it slowed me down. I needed it. It was hard. It was hard for me to go slower because you can hold space at, like, a um, very calm. And I do have a little bit of, like, global high activation running through my system, you know. So I it really it gave me, like, major bumpers for being with that relaxation phase. And that's essential to my healing. So, and then getting to hold space, like, naturally, I'm going to hold space for the other people in the group. And we had a very intimate, I think there was only 5 of us or 4 of us total. Yeah. Um, naturally, there's a part of me that, I can do that. And I'm doing I'm, like, as if I'm nodding, as if I'm holding space, like, that's just naturally happening for me. But it was interesting for my system, I got to learn how to slow down and not be the teacher and not be the person leading it. Like, that was a little bit hard for me. And that's a gift to my system and to my ego. The ego could sit back and I could just, you know,
Yeah.
exhale and
Yeah.
benefit. Like, it's because I need that.
Yeah.
I need that opportunity to rewire and feel what that feels like. And my system learned how to reorganize in that space. It
Yeah.
remembered how to reorganize. And I think just doing that in one-on-one, I think that I love one-on-one, and I have one-on-one, and that's rich, and I love that. But that connection is really important. One thing I want to share, one, like, kind of silly story that happened was, one time Derek was leading one of our coffee house weeks, and there was all of us were on the call, and this woman jumped in on our call who we didn't know, and she just dialed in. And someone had been talking, and she showed up, and no one said anything. and for a minute. It was just a short period of time. And and my reaction was, oh, like it was like I didn't even care because I felt so safe in our space and I just knew this is just a blip, like it's going to go away. Like there was no part of me that was on alert. Um, and and then in about like and then she jumped off the call. Like she had clearly, like it was an oops, someone had. And then someone in our group said, can we just pause for a moment and name that there was just a random person that showed up on our call? And then we processed that. And it was so beautiful because we got the reflection of like what it looks like in everybody's nervous system when something happens, and for a lot of us, not all of us, but for a lot of us, it was okay. And what my takeaway from that, Derek had said some sentence he said that really landed for me was like, in connection, the threat is less. And I think that that was really true in my body. Like I did not feel threatened at all. Total, complete stranger. I'm like, duly noted. And then she was gone. But I was with this group who I had felt a connection with. No part of me was like, and I wasn't in freeze either. I just
Yeah.
observed because this was our connection. And I think that's a really important piece. It comes down, so much of it comes to connection. Like safety is more available in connection when we have each other. And we were able to laugh about it after the fact. Like, how random is that? We just, pretty random. But
Yeah, it's very random. I think this is the only time it's ever happened.
yeah,
And I remember, in our debrief of it, it was like, whoa, what an opportunity to see
yeah,
what the autonomic system
yeah,
will do. And then we get to go up and we get to come down
yeah,
together. And it's one thing to be reading a polyvagal theory and reading Porges and safety is the absence of threat and the presence of connection. But it's like when you actually experience it, it's like it.
yeah,
It's not just words in a book anymore. It's
yeah.
like, oh, my system actually, from a co-regulated space where it has some buffer, doesn't have to over respond to something that's actually not a threat.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was like I mean, it might be a good idea to like do that intentionally, drop random people in into calls because I mean, at some point when people are more
No,
regulated.
I can't imagine that we would
Yeah.
ever. That sounds very cruel. But what would be very cool is remember during COVID, you could pay $100 and have a llama at your business meetings.
I
So
have never,
So
yeah.
there was like this whole service during COVID.
Uh-huh.
People were so bored at their meetings. You could beam a llama, and it was like a llama live cam, and the llama would just be, paying
That's so
attention.
awesome.
So that I'm more likely to do like a llama
Yeah.
cam, most
Yeah.
likely. Yeah. So cool to hear what you experienced, and it really warms me. It's very, very tender, very tender. This has been a lovely conversation. I could talk to you for hours. Is there anything you want to say for dessert?
Oh, just thank you. I mean, you've given me so many tools and I so appreciate you following your alignment, like following what's comes to you, that you followed all the little breadcrumbs to do what you're doing because it is so on purpose and it is so needed right now. And you are holding space for people to heal in ways that our ancestors couldn't heal, and we get to do the work, and my children are benefiting from this. So I mean, this
Yeah.
is big work that you're doing, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Seeley. Thank you for being a part of it and a part of our field in our small and really wonderful school.
Yeah.
I love you. Wishing you wonderful holidays. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. And if you, as usual, at the end of an interview, if you have something you want me to relay to Seeley, you can always email me and I'll pass it on to her.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.